That brings us to our discussion agenda, item number 17, our general fund budget shown in Exhibit G. Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Gant, members of the board. Before I get started on the PowerPoint, did want to draw your attention to the green booklet that was in your packet. Kind of give you a brief run through what you have there, so you, if you haven't had the opportunity to look at it. But under the budget tab, obviously, on the first page, you're going to have revenue projections, which are not very pretty in this version of the budget. And then on the next 17 pages, which is the easy part of this budget, is coming up with projected expenditures for next year. And then at the end of that, on the very last page, you have a recap of the expenditures of what we're proposing for next year. Then in the next section, you're going to have the salary and supplement schedules. And for each one of the salary schedules you see in here, they have all been inflated by 4% over the current year, with the exception of the schedules that are for supplements, for special duties, and for extracurricular duties. Those have been not been inflated. They've been the same as they were the current year. Then you have the fee schedules in next, and these fees have been in place for a while now. I want to draw your attention to page 3 and page 4. We have had some increasing costs for transportation and security for our athletics in the district, and the high school principals with athletics have gotten together and proposed that we increase our athletic fees from $50 per sport to $65 per sport next year. And then on the next few pages that you see here are some of the fees that we still have in the district. None of these are core classes. These are all exploratory type classes where we have the fees, and you can see that we are looking to eliminate some more fees on page 8 and 9, and these are basically your core classes in the IB at Irmo High School. And then on the very end you have I think the question was asked about some of the fees and how we're paying for workbooks and those type of things. On the very last page, this is the allocations that we have come up with as we've done away with fees, and these is what the schools get on a per pupil basis each year to replace those fees that were done away with over the last 3 years. And I'll be glad to answer any questions if you have any, but otherwise I'll move on.
Ms. Hutchison.
A quick question. For students who are deemed financially, I'm trying to think of the word, excuse me? Free and reduced lunch. How do we handle the fees? Or especially I'm thinking about the sports fees, because we certainly would not want to discourage any students for lack of money to be able to participate.
Well, each of your academic fees, obviously, we do reduce those fees or they're free for those students, depending on whether or not they qualify. Athletic fees, however, are not subject to that reduction. And it's really left up to each individual school whether or not they do that with their athletic fees.
I would say that really does concern me. Just that it might go overlooked. I really would hate to think that there's a student who is financially needy who could really benefit by participating in sports. In fact, might stay in school because of sports and the team building and everything else. So perhaps it's not possible this year, but I would really like to see us look at ways that we can ensure that financially needy students aren't deprived of opportunities to play sports.
And like I mentioned, that has been up to each individual school, and to my best of my knowledge, that has not been an issue, that those students who could not afford it have been allowed to participate.
May I speak to that, Mr. Chairman, and then if Ms. Hutchinson is finished with her question, I have a follow-up question. I know I can speak to Irmo because having been on the Yellow Jacket Club there prior to being on the board and having had two sons play multiple sports, the Yellow Jacket Club has, and I imagine still is part of their serving all the athletes at Irmo when there's a student. The bottom line is I don't know that there are any students that are not getting to participate because of an athletic fee. It may not be as formal as it is for some of the other fees, but I've seen time and time again the booster clubs pick that up. And also I believe the students are able to even do it on a payment, even if it's $5 a week and they can pay $30, they'll collect that. So my observation has been there's been a great deal of effort, one, not to single a student out, and two, to help them participate regardless of their ability to pay. I am concerned, and this gets my question, that we're increasing the athletic fee to $65. And if there's possibility that we can consider whether or not if they play multiple sports. And here's my concern, and maybe we address it down the road. There is a huge disparity between the cost to play some sports and others. At most of our schools, a student athlete can play football. I've had two play at Irmo for the cost of an athletic fee. I can tell you that's not true with baseball. It's probably cost me $700 this year to have an athlete play baseball. So I think there's got to be some way for us to structure, and I don't know if that is guidance from the chief for secondary education to the athletic directors for them to manage their budgets in a way that is not so onerous on some sports, whether there's male or female, or if that needs to be directed by policy of the board. If it needs to be directed by policy of the board, Dr. Melton, I'd be happy to bring that forward. But I just want to raise that as because we're talking about this fee was the only reason I'd raise it at this point.
Mr. Lovelace.
Mr. Richardson, there's a kind of, I'm going to wrap this into two parts into one question, but the way I read this is that the increases in expenses.
Mr. Lovelace, can you pull your microphone a
Okay,
little
I'm
closer?
sorry. The increases in expenses versus the increase in revenues brings us right now, the way you're projecting this, the way I read this, is about $4,256,000 that we have allocated more than.
I'm gonna get to that.
Okay. Well, anyway, the point I was, on Wednesday, we were asked to go to the state senate and talk to the senators. Okay, and one of the things that they wanted us, I know you mentioned in your schedules in here that it included a 4% increase.
Right.
Okay, one of the things that they've asked us to do is to tell the senators what it would cost our school district for the 4% increase in salaries. Do you have that? I mean, I know I can add these up, but I don't know whether these totals already include the 4% or whether.
They do.
They do.
The totals do include the 4%. And yes, I have the information. I don't have it with me, but
Yeah.
I have that information.
I have it, Mr. Richardson, and so Mr. Lovelace would know, I had intended after tonight, when we have gotten all our other legislative items, to send out an email to the full board. When that request came from the School Board Association, I sent that to Mr. Richardson, and I have it to send to the
Okay.
full board.
All right, that's good. And I wanted to ask, I asked earlier, Ms. Goggins, and I was deferred to you for the answer about the FOIA and the public participation. Do you remember that in the earlier?
No, I remember I can tell you, I don't track that. I have no idea what it cost us, and there's not a line item in this budget where I have for FOIA.
Okay. Well, could you find that out for us?
I don't think so, because I don't know how much time that each individual's put into looking at those FOIs requests. I don't think there's any way I could tell you that.
Okay, thanks.
We'll move forward with my budget now if there's no more questions.
I had one.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Ms. Hammond?
Ms. Hutchinson's question about free and reduced lunch, made me think, can we, and I don't mean right now, but could we get I'm sure you have a way to track it. I'd like to know from all of our schools, the number of free and reduced lunch percentage. I know it from 2017-18, which was, I got from the State Department, so it may have changed because that was like this is 2019. So I had some figures, but I thought I didn't have every school. I just looked up some. But I would like to know that for our own knowledge, for all of us. And I don't mean tonight, but that would be your office? I'm just kind of asking if I wanted to find that, or would it be another office?
Well, our student nutrition office.
Okay, I'm interested in that, to look at the whole district as a whole and see that. And then, this is kind of crazy, but I would love to know this. On the animal science, it's $50. That's one of the fees on this part, and there's no change. But is that like the Kate Center with our barn? Animal science, is that where they work on?
I
need
assume
to
they
know.
use the barn for that,
I
too.
mean, or is that a class that, that could be a classroom class? But I'd like to know, because I've been interested in what exactly what all our offerings are with the barn, because when we talked about it, we talked about they'd kind of use other people's cows or other people's horses. I mean, that's expensive to buy, but this was a couple of years ago when we talked about this, but this made me think about it when I looked at your lot. I understood a lot of the things, but I just wondered what that $50 went for.
That's something we probably need to ask somebody at the center.
I'd love an update about what all they offer at the barn and what, what it entails, because I've had people ask me and I can't really answer it.
Ms. Hutchison, may I,
Yes, yes.
since Ms. Hammond's asking questions about the center, if we could allow Mr. Giuliano to work with Dr. Gates. Ms. Hammond, if it's going to be a report to the board, or if
Yeah.
it's something we can just
Yeah,
get
that'd be
to
great.
you, but
Either-
the courses, of course, are varied, and depending on where a student is in their completer path, we need to make sure that people understand what's a 1 versus what a 2 may be. So if you allow Mr. Giuliano to work with Dr. Gates,
Yeah.
and we'll make sure that we can, how about we first try to email it to you, and if
That'd
you
be
prefer
fine.
to have a presentation, then we can certainly put that for an upcoming
I mean,
board
if
meeting.
the board wants, they may not want it.
Sure.
I've just had a lot of questions.
Yes,
I'd like
ma'am.
to have them.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Cates?
I'll offer apology to the board and to Mr. Richardson. We've gotten a little bit sidetracked, and I participated in that, so I apologize. We've kind of gotten flipped around, and I think it might make more sense to us if we let you go through your budget PowerPoint and then come back to the tabs in the book. That may give us a better frame of reference.
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Gates. Excuse me. And as usual, I do my disclaimer. Everything that you see in this budget right now is based on what the House of Representatives approved on March 13th. I will tell you that the Senate Finance Committee took the budget up last week and approved it. There were some changes that I will hit on. There wasn't a lot of changes over and above what the House had done, unfortunately. The full Senate will take it up, I believe, next week. We're supposed to start deliberations on the 15th of April. So later in April, we'll have a much better idea of where we stand with some of the revenue figures that Mr. Lovelace alluded to earlier. I will tell you some of the one difference that I'm aware of that really affects us as far as what Senate Finance did compared to what the House did was that they gave an additional $15 million to the base student cost, which will increase it by approximately $17 a student. Those are not reflected. That is not reflected in any of the revenue figures you see in this document. That would probably provide us an additional $290,000 roughly, based on where we are currently with our 45-day enrollment and where the state is with the 45-day enrollment. What the House did was they combined a lot of line items. I talked about that at the last board meeting. Nothing's really changed. They've rolled up our EFA line, they've rolled up the fringe line, and they've given us an additional $159 million to fund the 4% salary increase for our teachers. although they put them all in one line, there's still going to be 3 different methodologies for distributing that money, so nothing's really changed as far as how we're receiving the money. They've also included in this budget a mandatory 4% teacher salary increase. They've also increased the starting pay for teachers. On the salary schedules and the booklet for teachers, you can't tell it from just looking at this schedule, but in the first 5 cells, from 0 experience to 4 years experience, those have been, I guess the salary schedule has been front-loaded, so beginning teachers will get more money than they would have normally. The state minimum has moved up from $32,000 to $35,000 next year. We're going to be above almost above $38,000, close to $39,000 for a beginning teacher with a bachelor's degree and 0 experience in our school district. As a result of that, after that 4th or that 5th cell, everybody else gets a 4% increase. The House also, skipped a couple things here. They've also actually eliminated $12 million for technology that we were receiving. They put in $10 million for SROs, school resource officers. However, we don't really qualify for any of those funds because we already have SROs in all of our schools. The Senate did add some more money to that line item as well, but I don't think it helps us any. They also put in for capital improvement projects. $50 million of non-recurring funding is going towards school districts who really can't raise money locally for infrastructure. The Senate Finance added an additional $15 million of that as well. But once again, that's something that we won't really get the benefit of. Instructional materials, textbooks, $20 million non-recurring. And just to clarify what was talked about earlier, the state pays for all the textbooks. We don't get money and then we pay for them. The state pays for them and sends those books to us. And then they also put money in for school buses out of lottery funding. So what do we have to consider in this budget? Well, we know we have a 1% employer contribution increase for retirement for all of our employees. We've included in this budget a 7.4% increase in health insurance premiums for the district. However, we have not been given any percentage increase, but there's been money appropriated to help defer some of the cost of the increase. We don't know what that is yet, but I'm hopeful that the amount of money we have in this budget right now is overkill, and we can be able to reduce that once we find out what the actual increase should be. Like I said, we've got mandated 4% cost of living for teachers. We've also included 4% for all the other district employees. We've given every employee that's eligible a step increase. Obviously, we want to comply with all of our policies as far as teacher-student ratios and safety and well-being of our students and staff. We've also had to increase our costs or our budget because the costs have increased for our school resource officers. We've put additional money in for mental health services. We've also had to put some additional funding in for our technology, the ongoing expenses for licensing and maintenance and help and all of that good stuff. And we've also can reduce some of our expenditures from the current year. We had non-recurring expenditures in there to the tune of almost $1.5 million for the $500 loyalty bonus that we gave our employees in November of this year.
Mr. Richardson, if I may interject here, and we don't want this slide to appear awkwardly placed, but you just heard some considerations that Mr. Richardson was able to capture that have come forward from the faculty and staff. So here we've inserted the priorities that, of course, were coupled with my goals for this year that the board approved back in September. But it's important for me to pause momentarily to make sure you all understand the content and the context of which some of these suggestions and considerations that we're bringing forth to you have been included our advisory committees throughout the course of February and March, and as recent as of last Friday from our student leaders. So as we have gone to them and asked them to give us feedback of what's worked from this year's fiscal budget, what have you seen in your schools that have helped you be effective this year? What do you suggest? If there's one thing that you would like to say to us, make sure you continue this, what might that be? And then if you could have a request, what might that be? So looking at these 5 priorities that the staff and I have focused on for the 2018-2019 year, as you saw the slide just before this one, you'll see next to follow, a strong emphasis on priority number 1, about our strategic plan and where we're trying to improve, and then another strong emphasis on priority 5. And that's about the work and learning environment where students and staff feel safe physically, emotionally, and socially. Mr. Lovelace, I'd like to echo your remarks from earlier about our students and making sure that we have the appropriate resources to be preventative, which goes with number 5. We heard from our student leaders Friday, and Dr. Harris and I have discussed this, and we actually discussed it in executive staff today. Our student leaders from all 4 of our high schools, and the center also included, said discussing mental health is no longer taboo. Discussing mental health is no longer taboo.
Thank you.
Say that one more time.
And for our high school students to say to us they saw a difference this year, and there are seniors, they saw a difference this year, what a powerful statement that is for us to hear. So the slide Mr. Richardson just did and the one that you're going to see to follow, you're going to see a continuation of we've got to focus on mental health. So Dr. Harris and his team, along with some instructional representatives, have recently taken a visit to Darlington. We've got some ideas of some things that we would like to do, and we are hopeful that we can continue to find the contracted services because this fiscal year we've had difficulty finding the people to fill the jobs through our contracted partners. But because Dr. Harris and his team and I have been involved, we've had multiple conversations, and now we have a new level of assurance that they have heard our plea, and now they're ready to do something differently to make sure that we continue our efforts on mental health for the safety of our students and also for the wellness of our staff, because we know that the weight of the mental health of our students rests on our staff. They don't leave it when they leave our schools. They take that home with them and they worry about them, so it affects the staff in addition to affecting the family of the student. So I thought it was important to pause to let you all know our faculty advisory, which are teacher leaders, they've been elected by their peers to be the teachers of the year. They've been involved with giving us feedback. Our administrators in the district office and from our schools have been involved with giving us feedback for this. Our parents' cabinet were involved with giving us feedback on this. And as I just said a few minutes earlier, our student leaders were involved as recently as Friday, and every time there's been a consistency of we want to retain class size, we want to continue mental health. So the things that Ms. Richardson is sharing with you all this evening, we have heard and we can confirm for you. We've heard the request, we hear the plea, and now our recommendation is to continue the path that we're on. Ms. Richardson, if you'll proceed with the next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Melton. So what do we have in this budget? We have an additional $8,580,869 in here. What is that comprised of? Well, we've, like I mentioned earlier, we've added $300,000 due to the increased cost for our SROs. We've added an additional $100,000 in this budget for contracted mental health case managers, and then, of course, $200,000 for our increased cost for technology. We've also reduced our expenditures by, like I said, almost $1.5 million due to the non-recurring line item of the loyalty bonus in the current year's budget. And then, obviously, all of our step increases and cost of living and all the other things that are happening, fringe benefits increases, that comprises a little better than $9.4 million. But it all nets to a bottom line increase of $8,580,869. How's that broken down? Well, you can look right here to see our salaries are roughly 61% of our budget, $120 million. 494,837 are fringe benefits, and as I mentioned earlier, I hope that is a little high. 53,111,980. Contracted services, $13,691,002. All of our supplies and materials, $8,813,841, and then the other objects, $902,882, and then in our transfers and payments, $287,897 for a total of $197,302,439. This just gives you a graph showing the breakdown, but as you can see, salaries and fringe are a majority of our general fund budget. Approximately 88%, as a matter of fact. That was the easy part. Here's the hard part. As of right now, The revenue picture is a little fuzzy. It's a little early for me to get a handle on what we can expect from our local taxes next year. Be quite honest with you, we're about 4 or 5 months behind on getting information out of Richland County, so we're having a hard time tracking that revenue. Lexington County's all over it, and we get that in a timely manner. So you're not seeing a whole lot of increase on what we're looking at right now, but later in the month, I hopefully will be able to give you a little bit better picture of our local revenue. But right now, that totals $69,285,883. Our projected revenue from the state is fairly accurate. It's still got a few moving parts, but right now, we're looking at total state revenue of $117,711,797. Our EFA funding that you see there of $42.5 million is actually projected to be less than what we are currently getting this year at 45 days. We're currently getting $42,615,000. You can see we're actually projected to get a little less than that next year. And our total funds available are $193,046,531, which on this just shows you how that's broken down. State being the majority of where we get our funding from. This is what you want to know. Right now, we're projecting that we're going to have a deficit of $4,255,908. As we get a little bit better numbers going into late April, early May, we'll be able to get this deficit down, hopefully. We do not know what our actual allowable millage increase could be for next year. We still have not received the population growth for our district, and it has not been posted as of today. Right now, a 2.44% increase in millage would give us approximately 6.3 mills that we could go up without having the population factor added in. And that would give us roughly $1.5 million additional dollars. This is the state budget calendar. As I mentioned, the Senate Finance has finished their budget deliberations. They passed their budget last week. It is moving to the Senate floor starting on April 15th. And if things go according to plan, we should have a budget coming out in the first part of May. Here's our budget calendar for the district. Obviously, today's April 8th. This is our discussion reading. We'll come back on the 29th with hopefully a better picture of where we are, and moving towards May 20th as final approval. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation, so I'll be glad to try to address any questions.
Ms. Gardner.
I've been following as much as I can what's going on in the Senate, and you're right, they're not going to really give much more money. But I have a basic question about these kind of things. Since our fee schedules are already above what the state mandates, that 4% increase, is that still mandated for us, that it's across the board, you have to pay 4% more than even what we're paying, or do we have to, is that 4% based on what the state's fee schedule will pass? I mean, in the Senate. Do you see what I'm asking? Like, could we potentially do less, or is that?
Well, you're mandated, there's a couple of things that come into play. Because we have what we call local, I'm assuming we're talking about teacher pay.
Yes, sorry, teacher pay, yeah. 4%.
Let me just go ahead and say this. Teacher pay is a little bit different than everybody else pay, okay? We're not mandated to do anything for any other employee other than our certified staff.
Right.
That's what we get mandated to do. But you've got this whole thing about the local supplement. That's the amount we pay over and above what the state minimum salary is. So in order for a teacher to get a 4% increase, we have to inflate that local supplement as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's been lawsuits and everything else that go along, but basically you cannot pay a teacher a local amount less than you did in a previous year. So I hope that sort of answers your question, that we're having to keep that local supplement inflated as well.
That was my question. Are we making sure that we're giving a full 4%, whether
Absolutely.
it's mandate? I mean,
Absolutely.
since we're already above, are we still doing that?
And we
So-
do, so we inflate the local supplement on an annual basis as well.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. White, you had a question?
I think last time you said that even though we had to do the 4%, we weren't getting the corresponding amount we had to put in fringe benefits.
Well, I mean, there was no additional money allocated or appropriated, I should say, for school districts for the increase in our retirement benefits or our health benefits. The state does a statewide allocation, and we will eventually get a little part of that. So that's how I know we've got a health insurance increase coming.
So I mean, basically, when they say, and I'm saying this for the folks that are going to the session with the legislators, that, you know, part of our problem is you can say, give people a 4% raise, we're giving you a 4% raise, but they're not giving us a corresponding increase that goes into fringe benefits as a result of that 4% raise. Is that a correct statement?
That is correct this year.
Yeah. So that's part of the message, that they didn't fund it. If it's a mandate, it's not funded again. And then I think we talked about it last time, the millage increase that would be allowed is about $1.5 million. Our step increase is,
About 1.2.
so it's most of, you know, I mean, the millage increase is, if nothing else changes, just our step increase is going to
Eat that up, right.
Eat that up,
Right.
yeah.
Absolutely it will. Excuse me. Pollen.
Take a break, Mr. Richards.
And the thing, I guess, that I want people to take away from this as well, I mean, we can talk about all of these different appropriations, but I think the thing that sticks in my mind more than anything, when you look at what has been done by the House, is that they've actually given us less money for the base student costs than was appropriated in 2008 before the economy tanked. The Senate came back and put an additional $15 million towards the base student costs, which gets us about $1 above where we are currently. So we're not getting a whole lot of money to pay for all of this. Now, they've given us, there's $159 million that has been appropriated to cover teacher raises. Okay, that will be on a per teacher basis, so it will cover that increase. But that's all, and that's all it can be used for. So I guess what I'm trying to get, although they are paying for the teacher raises, they're not giving us anything else to cover any of our other increased costs.
And it's the costs that go up every year.
Yes.
Some of these costs go up irrespective of whether you do anything new or different. And the step increase is a classic example of that. I mean, that's a mandatory cost increase every year. But you said that the EFA went down. Was it EFA?
EFA, well, what happened was they did not give us any additional funding for it. They're projecting additional students next year statewide, which means we've got the same amount of money, got to be spread out over more students, which implies that the base student cost is going to be less. As a matter of fact, this year, they've capped us at 45th day because the student growth was already above what they'd anticipated. So we're actually, we've actually been capped $5 on the base student cost this year. I'm hoping that will go away once 135-day numbers come in, but right now, we're capped this year.
But I guess for everybody on the board that's going to talk to the legislature, I mean, the thing I've always taken away is the estimated base student cost. The Budget and Control Board, is that who publishes that number?
They've changed Revenue and Fiscal Affairs now.
Okay, so but the government, I mean, the state publishes the estimated cost per student, but we never get anything close to that. And if we ever got anything close to that, we wouldn't have problems funding these schools.
Well, they estimate the funding per student, not the cost, but the funding per student.
What's the
Looks
difference in
different.
estimating funding and estimating cost? I thought they were trying to approximate what it actually cost.
They're trying to tell everyone how much each district gets on a per pupil basis, and they're estimating your federal, state, and local dollars. Nobody can tell me what it costs to educate a student.
That's right.
And then you couple that with class size. You may have neighboring districts that have larger class size than us, so the costs will be affected by programs and by policies such as class size that we have committed to in this district where the board has said, keep the class size lower. So just that alone would be a variable that would change how we calculate how much it costs to educate a student in this district. And then, of course, national board is another thing that you could add to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I don't know if you know who Frank Rainwater is. He's the executive director of the Revenue and Fiscal Affairs. And he was asked by the House Ways and Means Committee early last year, or last year, and he's been working on it. And we've actually worked with him to try to come up with a formula. They want to look at what school districts are actually spending, and what it actually costs to I guess, educate a student. But then you start looking at each district individually, you can see how costs are just all over the board. And one of the things we try to do is help them understand. And so I provided a copy of our board policy on teacher-student ratios, that yes, we spend a lot of money, but here's why. Our student-teacher ratios are much lower than a lot of our surrounding districts. So we're going to spend more money in the classroom than some of these other districts. So I wanted to make sure that they understood that we're pretty strict on our board policy, so it's costing us more. I think the results speak for themselves. So, I just want to make sure that we're not going to be somehow hurt down the road because we're spending more in the classroom than some other school districts do.
Ms. Hammond, I believe you had a question.
Yes, my question's on the mental health, the slide, if I read it right. Was it 200,000? Did I see that right?
100,000 for.
this
Oh, it was
year.
only,
mental
it was
health.
100,000?
last year.
Okay.
We'd given 100,000 this year in the current budget, and then
Right.
another 100,000 for next year.
Now, did we have any last year? I mean, this is the first year we've put that as a line item for mental health.
We did.
Dr. Harrison, Ms. Richardson, and I kind of take that as a triad. So we've had, of course, those services because Dr. Harris can report, if you're interested, the number of case managers we've had in School District 5. But we can say what the percentages are, and our vision is to get to the point that we can have one case manager per 2 schools. We're not there yet.
Well,
So this fiscal year was our first visible commitment, trying to work to increase that visibility of managers in our schools. And then looking at next year, we need to increase it even more to make sure that we can achieve, hopefully, that 1-to-2 ratio of 1 case manager per 2 schools across the district, because we are far from that target.
Well, that was what I was going to say. With that amount that we're putting in for this year, it would just take care of 2 case, or how many case managers we could have?
Dr. Harris had calculated that for us, so I'll defer to him. Dr. Harris?
Certainly. We do have, in total, 8, between the 2 counties, 8 case managers to date. As we've indicated, this is an additional $100,000, which will bring us up to a 1 case manager for every 2 schools. So basically what this will do is give us an additional approximately 6, based on the way the contracts are written between the 2 counties. It is not at a full cost to us. I mean, there's an agreement very, very similar to what we do with our resource officers. So our shared cost, that would get us to an additional 6, and that would put us right at the point where we would be at a 1 case manager per two schools, which would be a far cry from where we are right now.
Right.
And certainly giving the services where they're most needed.
Well, I know it's a work in progress, but, and we've alluded to this, but, and I know it's a late hour and we still have other stuff, but it's an important point to make as far as how you want to attack bullying and you want to attack children with suicides.
Yes, ma'am.
And those 2, to me, are paramount of needing the mental health. And I'm not even sure, and I know it's a start, and I'm glad we're doing that, but I want to envision, and we can do it another night, but I'd like to know what the job description and the responsibilities of that case manager, because honest to goodness, if they're not in the school, all the time, they'll have to get that information from the teacher. And I can assure you a teacher could identify some that need to go to a case, and be seen and counseled. And I know we have counselors, and so many of the public think that our guidance counselor, that's one of their jobs. I mean, you would think that, guidance counselor, and a lot of them have a psychology degree, but there's so much more. That's why I said, say it again, if we've got to start addressing and talking about mental health. So this is a mere penance to me of the amount we need to put there. But I understand we have to start somewhere. So that, I don't mean that as a criticism.
Yes,
But
ma'am.
I so want to, like I said, even though it's late, I just really want to hammer that to this board, that just like your class size means you can educate the kids better, if we don't address the mental health problem that is becoming rampant in our schools, we're going to lose them to not getting their education anyway. So I just, that's my soapbox for tonight. But I'm so glad to see it in there. It was it was important to me. And I kept thinking, did I see that right? I was hoping it was 200,000, so I'm wrong. It's only 100,000.
But 100,000
Well,
for this year.
Yeah,
100
this
for
one
this
year.
year,
I know we
plus
start-
another 100.
Combined total, too.
So over the course of 2 years, Ms. Hammond, you're correct.
So it
Over
would
the course
be
of
two-
2 years, it would be an additional
Okay.
200,000 over the course of 2 years. Yes, ma'am.
And about teacher salary, this is different. The 4%, because y'all have talked about this, but if, for the teachers out there, they would get the 4% and then they'd get their step on top of that.
That's
Lynn,
correct.
And
That's
it
correct.
might end up being, percentage-wise, maybe 6%? Would it end up
It,
being?
it varies, but on average, you
Just
you
an
can say a
average.
step is 2%, but it's not for every step.
And then like Mr. White was talking about that, was it 7.4% that the amount could go up for their, health care, fringe benefits?
That's what it was for this year. That's what I've got in there for next year, but hopefully that's high.
So I know that won't make any teacher happy, but it's better than not having any raise.
No,
and
that's
then
on the
them going up
employer, that's on the
7.4%.
employer to keep it off the employee, so they would not have to pay that additional.
Oh, that'd be in hours. I got you. That was another thing I didn't understand. I thought
Now,
that
something could be passed along to the employee as well. Typically, what they do is, when they don't want to hit the employee for the additional cost, that's when they appropriate a little money for school
and
districts to
that
pay
might
on their
still
behalf.
come when we see the final budget from the Senate. We hope.
We know we're going to get something. I just don't know what percentage we're looking at health insurance increasing.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Cates.
It seems we have, not only have we added mental health dollars, Dr. Melton, but we added some career specialists that
Sir.
could free up some of our other staff that may be appropriately trained to provide mental health services
That's true.
on a limited basis. So we really are kind of compounding our dollars there with that.
Yes, sir. This year, the board passed with the budget 4 additional, at that time, CDFs, Career Development Facilitators. We now refer to them as career specialists. Once again, we changed titles because that's what we're asked to do. So we've done that through the department so that we could take some of the burden off of counselors and let counselors do their responsibilities while these career specialists are helping advise students towards their career path, so that secondary counselors can focus more on the mental health and well-being of our students. So that's this fiscal budget that we've got underway. We've not projected what we have for you here tonight, additional career facilitators as we did last year.
Have we, one of the concerns I have, having worked in the mental health field, is the shortage of providers.
Yes, sir.
I feel it's a safe statement to say if, we found $500,000 to put into mental health, we don't have the providers to bring those services. If we wanted to go one-to-one, one mental health professional per school, have we explored using a similar model that we do for other professional services such as OT, PT, speech, where kind of the core of those services are district employees and we're only negotiating for supplementing with contracted services rather than all contracted services?
There's a complicated answer to your question, so bear with me while I try to create context, if you will. Dr. Harris and his team have looked towards where might a social worker be better fit for some of the needs that we have that we could employ, such as we already do. Where might we continue to contract with others? And that's really what has led to our work with specifically the Richland area, the Richland County Columbia office for our mental health. Currently, we have 7 case managers for Lexington County, but 1 for Richland County. 1 for Richland County. But Dr. Harris and I have been assured that before this academic year ends, we'll have a second one with the commitment that we can look forward to expecting more next year, that they have a different process. We've also offered the idea of might we consider posting vacancies with our HR connected so that they could see even though you're contracted through this vendor, you're going to be working in School District 5 for this allocated time period of one academic year to give some visibility to District 5 being out there. The third piece I'd like to add is, you heard me reference earlier, Dr. Harrison, Mr. Giuliano have sent a team recently to Darlington County who's doing something very innovative with telepsych services so that we can remove the barrier of families being able to provide transportation to make an appointment to see someone so that prescriptions can be written and it doesn't disrupt the child's educational day, nor does it take away, it removes the barrier that a family may not have the availability of transportation or the time. So we're looking to see what might that be and what cost might we incur to do that to make sure that our students get qualified services for their medical support that they may need. So we're not to the point yet that we're ready to commit. We certainly have not signed anything, but I think Dr. Harris would probably say we are curious and we are visiting and asking lots of questions through this, this query that we have. Dr. Harris, anything I've forgotten that you'd like to add?
No, I think you covered it well. I will just simply say and reiterate what a wonderful opportunity we've had to discuss with the members of the Department of Mental Health to really come to us and to indicate that they are on board with making certain that we have all the providers that we need, particularly as we pursue this 1-to-2 model. I will also say that we're just a couple of days off, Dr. Melton. We're scheduled to go to Darlington on the 22nd. So
Oh, well,
haven't gone there
okay.
yet, but we're
It's not
almost
May
there.
yet.
But everything else is right. Everything else is correct. And so what a wonderful opportunity for our students and our staff and our families in particular to basically look at as you're looking at your computer right now, and to have some one-on-one FaceTime opportunities with a physician and to do some prescriptions, and by the same method. It's a great opportunity. Darlington is exploring it this year. They're the first district in the state to do that. So we're looking to kind of piggyback on that and bring it here to School District 5, in addition to increasing our level of, or number of case managers here in the district. So a lot on the table at this time.
So, Mr. Gates, I would say we're looking at a variety of options, but because of the meetings that we've had with representatives from the state and also the Columbia office, there's a renewed commitment that they understand our concern, they've heard our plea, and they're ready to do things a little bit differently too. So our recommendation currently is let's stay on pace to try to support the mental health piece the way that it is so that we can have some shared cost responsibilities. But if that doesn't work out, we may ask you to help us reposition some towards social workers that may become our employees or additional positions of other specialties. So we're premature in a sense, but we're making strides for sure towards the vision that we've created.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We'll have more opportunities. Mr. Richardson, I know you have one of your employees here that helps you crunch these numbers. Anybody else here with you tonight, or?
Mr. Shealy crunched all these numbers, as a
Oh, he
matter
did,
of
okay.
fact.
Mr. Shealy, would you stand up? We don't recognize our employees enough, but thank you for crunching these numbers and having this conference.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. That takes us, our next discussion item is item 18, proposed revisions to board policy IHAE, physical education, shown in Exhibit H. Mr. Giuliano.
Mr. Gant,
Yes, ma'am.
because the late hour and our staff has been working since probably 6:30, I'm wondering if it would be possible for me to make a motion that we move both items number H and I forward, and recommend that we, at the next meeting, handle discussion and first reading at the same time, getting us out of here.
That's a
I
great
second
idea.
that.
Great idea.
Okay.
Second that motion, Ms. Hammond?
Second that motion.
Thank you.
It wasn't a very
I
well-spoken
thought it was excellent.
motion, but,
We got your
Appreciate it.
message.
Very good.
okay.
Mr. Giuliano,
Ms.
that
Stowers, you want? Okay, thank you.
won't delay us. We'll be moving at the same rapid
Yes.
pace if you're good with that. All right, that's wonderful. That brings us to.
Should we vote? We need to
Yes,
vote
we
on
should
that.
vote. We should.
Okay.
Vote on that
So
motion.
we have a motion and a second. Any discussion further? Yep, you ready?
No, you need a second?
We already got a
Oh,
second.
you already got a second? Okay.
So all
I'll
those in
vote.
favor, please raise your hand. That passes unanimously. And board members, help me, but for information item, next meeting's going to be April 29th, but Our special call meeting, what, is that
That's
April?
May the 6th.
That's May 6th.
May the
6th?
6th.
Okay. My gosh, I was trying to put it in April, and I didn't know where it was gonna fit. Okay. So April 29th at Harbison West. So I would entertain a motion right now to adjourn. Who would like to make that motion? Ms. Hammond makes that, and Mr.
I'll
White
second it.
second. All right, any discussion on that? Thank you all for being here, and thank you all, the board, for your great inputs, and thank you, staff, for the wee hours.